1-3 National Harbor, $500 max buy-in. Um, it was definitely an interesting one. So the little about the atmospherics of the table. There was two very actiony players on the. So I'm in seat 3, and seat 5 and 7 are very actiony. Call all the time. Definitely the people you want to be in hands against. So I'm the hero in the cutoff with 800. Villain 1, which is one of those wild kind of calling station players, is under the gun with 1100.
Okay.
Then Villain 2 is in middle position with 450. He's not one of the action players, but he's new to the point where he's asking things like, "Wait, a straight beats a flush?" Kind of new player.
Okay.
And then on the flop, the other action player is also in.
Okay.
So my hand is Queen 9 of clubs.
On the button, right?
No, cutoff.
Okay.
But I end up in position.
In cutoff. Okay. Uh-huh.
So the under the gun, which is the actiony player, limps.
Okay.
It gets to middle position. The young kid, he raises to 15.
Okay.
The other action player calls. So now it folds around to me.
Okay.
So I could, in position, I could raise here. I definitely thought about it, but I didn't want to raise those two players out of the hand. I had a good enough hand. I knew I was way above their ranges. They didn't really have ranges. They would play any ace, any suited cards. They were all over the place.
And how
I didn't want to raise them out.
How much did you have again? I know you said it at the top, but just
I was at 800.
Right,
so
800.
I'm 800.
Okay,
so I'm effective against the main villain, and then 450 is what villain 2 has.
Okay, so you overcall here, right? Is that right?
I do.
Okay.
Yep.
So you overcall. It goes limp, raised to 15. I mean, you could squeeze. I mean, again, the closer you are to the button, the more flatting you can do. Queen 9 suited is not a great hand. If it's not a squeeze happy table, I mean, I don't mind the call. I would just say, like, you definitely need, if you're trying to play for as much profit as possible down at the low stakes, you need to know what the rake structure is. Because, like, in a place like Texas, this can be a profitable call, but in a place like California, where it's a $7 flat drop, it definitely cannot be a profitable call. So, I think MGM Harbor is in the middle with a rake or something like that, right? $5
is, yeah.
max or something. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's $5 max.
Yeah.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
At 10% maybe.
Yeah. So, okay.
Then the other action player in the under the gun calls. Okay. So we go 4 to the flop.
Okay, so it's like 60 plus 60 and change, something
60.
like that. Okay.
Yep, 60.
Okay. Yep. Okay.
So the flop comes Jack of clubs, 8 of clubs, 4 of clubs.
Oh, you flop a flush.
I do.
And a straight flush draw too, right?
Yep.
Yep. Okay.
So it checks around to me.
Okay.
And so I'm gonna bet. I want to get money in with these guys because I know they could call with any ace. The ace of clubs is definitely in their hands. Could be, or king of clubs. They'll call. So I want to build a pot. So another thing is right to my right in the seat 2. There's a pro who I play with all the time, a local pro. He's kind of like a work friend. Is kind of how I think about it. So that's only important because I'm looking at my chips. I'm getting ready to count. And as I extend my arm out, I hear him say, "Oh, wait, hold on, he's about to act." And then I look up, and the turn's on the table, a 2 of spades, as my chips leave my hand and hit the table.
So how much did you bet, by the way?
25.
Okay, so here bet's 25, and then they prematurely put the turn out, right?
Right.
Okay. So I assume you call the floor over, and they're going to reshuffle that turn card? Okay.
Yeah, the floor comes over. And it's because it was a new dealer, so he didn't even know. So the floor is actually teaching him and like going through it. It took way longer. So I have a mental. So I've had this happen a couple of times, and every time it happens, I'm kind of superstitious. I'm in the military, and I've had it's just superstition based on my life experience. So I'm a little superstitious. So every time this has happened to me, when they reshuffle, if it was a good card, I always get a bad card. So I just have this like mental block. I'm like, of course.
By the way,
club's going to come out.
By the way, for people that are new to poker, usually what they'll do, at least and definitely in California, is they try to keep the integrity of the river. So they will take the turn that was prematurely out, right? And then I think they burn in turn, and what the river would have been the turn. Then they shuffle back in that card that was prematurely, and then they put out a river without burning. So that river is what the turn was to sort of keep the, even though it's all fucking random, right? But anyways, okay. So you bet 25. Yep.
I do.
Uh huh.
Yep. So as the whole conversation with the floor is happening,
Mm-hmm.
out of the corner of my eye, the under the gun calls, and then the middle position raises to 75.
So, by the way, obviously the deuce of spades, which I think you said is not coming on the turn because it's going to be shuffled
Right.
back in for the river. So, under the gun calls and
Exactly.
MP1 raises to 75. Now, this guy was the pre-flop raiser, right?
Yes.
So this is really interesting because when you look at this is why I think this is an interesting call here too. You know, obviously something a little bit weird happened, but boy, I just with the queen high flop, like, you talk about being balanced and stuff, and like what hands would you bet three bet the flop with in a given scenario. But I just think that you have the best hand here against MP1 as the pre-flop raiser almost all the time. So rarely would I see somebody, check raise a flop nut flush here as played. It's interesting also to note kind of the distribution on Jack 8-4 all clubs with you with Queen 9 of clubs, because there aren't many reasonable King high flushes here that the pre-flop raiser would have either, because it would just be King 10, right?
And he's the one most likely to be. So he's red, so he knows a little bit. He's just red, but just now acting. So I could see him having a more reasonable range than the others.
So, I mean, the question here is that, under the gun you said was kind of short, right? Was it 300 or something?
Yes.
Yeah.
400. No. So the middle position is short. So the kid who raised, he is 450. Under the gun's deep.
Okay.
It's about 1100.
So, I mean, the only thing that I would say is that, I mean, once in a great while, this guy might have, the under the gun might be sandbagging something, but I would seriously consider bet three betting here. I gotta be honest with you. I don't, it's interesting. It's kind of a small race size. We're going to do a call later on too with a small race size multi-way because it's like to 75. It's a little bit interesting. I mean, I think calling is also fine here too. But if I'm never folding to under the gun and it's 1-3, I might not have to worry really all about being balanced. And how often is MP1 going to check raise fold here? Now, with that being said, you hold two of the clubs in your hand, so the chances of another club coming isn't all that great. So I can also see calling. It's just something to note, I would say. Just something to note that there can be some bet three bets here.
Yeah, so I would say that if it didn't happen where the whole missed deal, I mean, steal's not the right word, I would have raised because I would have said the same thing. I thought maybe because I could see him having even ace five with ace of clubs or something like that. So I
Right.
still have it.
So did you call?
Oh yes, I called,
And
then so did under the gun.
Right.
Yep.
So under the gun calls. Right. Okay, so now the pot's 285. Again, the action was check to the hero who flopped the flush, bets 25, under the gun calls. Pre-flop raiser check raises to 75, hero calls, under the gun calls, which is also interesting too. The under the gun, I don't know what kind of player he is, but he should have something here. And I mean, really, if he had a jack without a club, this should really be an easy fold here. So it's interesting to see what he's sticking around with here too.
Yeah, so he had a very wide range. He was calling. He could have the ace of clubs also. He could have ace of deuce
Right.
offsuit with ace of clubs. That was well within his range.
Okay, so what's the turn?
So the turn is the king of clubs.
Oh man, that sucks. Right? Yeah. Okay.
It absolutely sucks.
Mm-hmm.
So my plan was before I was going to bet big. If no club, I'm betting
Of course.
big.
Sure.
As soon as I saw it. So, but now I'm like, he's already shown a propensity to check raise. So now this is my head. I'm going through a million things in my head right now. So fortunately, it goes check to me, and I couldn't. I was going to bet, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I could just see either one of them having the ace of clubs. So I talked myself out of it, and I ended up checking.
Well, the thing is that you gotta go back to the whole. I mean, I like a check back here, but I think this is a good exercise in hand reading here too. The only reason to bet here would be to get called by either a set or some sort of smaller flush, and I find it hard to believe that anybody has a smaller flush here that's going to call unless they may have also flopped a flush with you. And the reason being is because, well, of course, you lose to the ace of clubs, so forget about the ace of clubs. You have the queen of clubs. The jack of clubs is out there, so someone would have to have the naked 10 here that wasn't flopped. So unless it was specifically jack 10 off with the 10 of clubs, it's just, I mean, is under the gun limp call and then calling raise with 10s with the 10 of clubs that he didn't raise pre-flop with. Same is pre-flop raiser check raising with 10s with the 10 of clubs. I find it very hard to believe that there's going to be a smaller one card club out there that you're going to get, sort of called by. Now, with that being said, if it gets checked through in the river's a brick and it gets checked to you again, sure, I think I might bet for value at the on the river, but I think the play here is to check back.
Great, yeah, and that's what I do. I check.
So I wouldn't feel bad about it. I mean, if you it sounds like you were like, oh, I should have bet, I should have bet. No, no, I don't think so.
Yeah, so it's just I let the misdeal get in my head, and I actually, and when we get to the end, I'll talk more about it. But it just I know superstition. You shouldn't be superstitious, but again, every time I get a misdeal, I get a bad card, and I end up getting sometimes stacked on a few other times.
That's all good. So now they're going to reshuffle the deck, right? Shuffle that thing back
So they
in.
did that.
Yep.
So, but we also, so with the king of clubs out there, now we just need a 10 of clubs for the straight flush. So in my mind, I was like, I need the 10 of clubs.
Well,
That's where I was at
you
moment.
beat the ace high flush, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. So river is blank. It's a 6 of diamonds.
Okay.
Under the gun checks.
Okay.
And then about the same time the undergun's checking, middle position snaps in a $100 bet.
100. Wow. Well, I mean, God, for that sizing, man. I mean, boy, like I said, it's kind of a common theme where I don't like to make like big folds at these levels. I mean, you're going to be getting almost 4-1. I don't think the under the gun really is checking the ace of clubs here twice. So if we dismiss him, it does make sense that MP1 might have the nut flush here. Oh, it's kind of close. It's kind of close here for me. Like if you bet 150, I kind of want to fold because it really makes sense. But I might toss in the call here out of frustration. Yeah. But it does make sense that the MP1 preflop raiser has the ace of clubs here. Yeah, people saying side call. Yeah, that's kind of how I feel too. Yeah,
that is exactly what I ended up doing. I tanked for a minute. I was like, I couldn't let it go. I was like, the king's gone now, so the only thing I have to be worried about is the ace. Yep. So I ended up calling. And so then the undergun calls also.
Okay. Wow. Calls.
Yeah, so we have 3 callers to showdown.
Whoa, it sounds to me like how does the under the gun call again? Because it's so unlikely unless he's so bad that he has Jack 10. So this is what I'm going to say. I don't remember the results of this, but a live hack that I think is especially true at the lower stakes is you would be surprised how many people who flop a flush when they get truly counterfeit, which means that like their flush is still playing, but it's no longer a flop flush. They have difficulty releasing a flopped flush or any 2-card flush, meaning that they had a 2-card flush and there was 3 on board, whether it's on the flop or on the turn. And then when another flush card comes, I've seen some really pathetically bad calls because it's like a mental game type of thing. So I wonder if under the gun might have flopped a small flush and maybe MP1 has the ace of clubs here. So what's the reveal?
So the under the gun flips over his hand. He has 2 3 of clubs.
Oh my.
So I flip mine over.
So he's got the worst flush. So this is what I'm talking about, right? Like, does he call there with pocket 3s with 3 clubs? No, he's calling with deuce 3 of clubs because he flopped the flush. He can't fold. He overcalled. Okay.
So then I flip mine over, and then I hear the middle position go, damn. And he flips over 5-7 of club.
Wow. So MP1 also flopped the flush?
Yes, flush over flush over flush on the flop.
Oh, I get a couple of things to say about this. Number one, right off the bat, I mean, I don't really know what the hell MP1 is doing at the end. This is why you have to side call at these levels, because it just makes absolutely no sense. Why would he bet 7-5 of clubs? Is he expecting to get called by worse here? Given this action after you call the check raise, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Number two, this is one of the rarest cases. I don't know mathematically if it's rarer to see 3 flop flushes. Wow, and a 4th club. That's crazy. But yeah, I was going to say, in all the commentary that I've done, I've seen set over set over set maybe 2 or 3 times. I've never seen 3 flop flushes, which is crazy, but just goes to kind of show you how weird it is. There was one time I was playing at the bike in 2006 where I was playing at the table in an afternoon before I was commentating, and I saw 2 flop flushes happen in the same session. And I've never seen it happen in all my years doing commentary. But one of the things, too, that I wanted to pick up about this is that I think this has to go for a little bit of mental game here, too. And I think this is a valuable lesson that you're going to learn here. Because you can kind of take away from this, and especially for all you guys that have maybe some mental game issues, you can take away from this and be like, oh, the dealer fucked me, right? Oh, like, I mean, if it wasn't for the dealer's mistake, like, I would have been, I would have stacked both of these guys. Now, while that's true, everything is entirely random. Now, I had a hand in the monster stack where it was actually one of the few misdeals. I never got dealt pocket aces. And on the one misdeal that I had over 2 days, I got dealt pocket aces under the gun. But the reason why I was dealt pocket aces is, and the reason why it was a misdeal is because the dealer didn't deal in a player that was away from the table, so missed a spot. So the cards would have been different anyways. The point is that, listen, guys, you just got to make the best decisions that you possibly can at the time. And the cards are entirely random. You cannot control the butterfly effect of things happening. You might also see this too, where it's not something weird that happens, but maybe a player does something 1 out of 100 times, and it kind of screws you out of a big pot because that was the 1 out of 100 times he decides to check raise with air or something like that. Like, I would not. The times that I get up away from the table and have to walk like it off sometimes and take a mental break is when I make like a bad laydown in a big pot and somebody like calls in between and I don't overcall, because that's my decision point, right? But in terms of the cards, like when you get it in with aces versus kings, you're only in 82% favor. This is what I try to talk about when like running it more than once. Like if you get into $1,000 pot with aces versus kings, your equity, if the total pot is 1,000, is only $820. So if you win, if you're running it once and you win, you're running above expectation, right? You are, because you just won 1,000. You're running $180 above expectation. People don't look at it that way. So you just gotta, I mean, it kind of sounds to me like you're like, oh, this always happens. You know, maybe it sticks out because the dealer put out the deuce, but I wouldn't think twice about it. Now, it's easy for me to say that, but I'm just saying, you just got to make the best decisions that you can, and the cards you can't control. You can't control these things.
So it's funny, in the email I sent, I actually said something like, if it wasn't for the dealer's mistake, I would have been able to get that 2.5 times double up. So yeah, that's a good point, and it is hard. That's what I'm saying, yeah. But I think it's definitely something I need to work on.
Yeah, don't go down this rabbit hole with the whole thing, because it's just gonna, it's not good for your poker game. It's not good for your mental game. It's not good for your thought process. There's a lot of different things that can happen. But I appreciate the call, RB. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks.
And I like to give those kind of like mental game lessons. We don't have like a mental game session on Crush Live Poker. And I tell people the reason why is because I've never had these issues with mental game. And it just wasn't necessarily my strengths. I'm just trying to give you the best advice that I can. I never understood why people would tilt when they got a bad beat. Because again, for the same reasons, people don't look at it like, a guy might tilt off like a couple buy-ins because he loses aces against kings pre-flop, but he's not supposed to win every single time. It's poker, right? I mean, if there wasn't enough luck in poker, we wouldn't have a game. You don't gamble against a chess grandmaster. You'll never win. There has to be, and this is why PLO is such a great gambling game, because in the short term, the equities run closer together. So it appears like you have sort of more of a chance over the long term. Probably the win rates are higher, but there is more short-term variance. But you just can't control some of these things. So, I mean, that's the best advice I can give.